was rather surprised by your selection of tunes for the concert there, seeing as how you only did 5 from the latest album, whereas most people will choose to concentrate on the album as sort of, you know, a way of promoting it on the road. Do you have any other intentions in regard to your the type of concerts you do?
I think so. I think the main point is I always see concerts as on the side of the punter, as being a punter myself. I get very tired when I have to go and sit and listen to an hour and a half of songs that I don't know. You know, the reason I like to go and see shows to be able to get involved in it and listen to songs. Also, on a personal point of view, when you work an album, you do it for, you know, like when you start writing and recording, it ends up to being 2 years. I mean, it's 2 years ago since I started working on this album, and it gets very tiring. You know what I mean? So I would bore myself if I did the whole album. And also, I just think I like giving people a selection. And not just sticking to new material, which I think is a bit dull for a live show.
早すぎて全然わからない。
自分の体験から言ってね、そのなんていうのかな、そのコンサートに行ってね、で新曲ばっかりやってられたら疲れるし飽きるから、でしかも自分がそのコンサートをこうやった場合には、これはもう2年がかりでそのレコードを作ったんじゃない？ずっと2年間そういう曲ばっかりやってるから、今度またステージやらなきゃいけないとなるともうたまんないから。ファン側からしても自分からしてもね。
で自分も面白くない。そうなんだ。いろんな曲やった方が楽しめるという。さっきちょっと聞いた話なんだけど、アンコールが僕見た時1回しかなかったんだけど、体調悪かったんですか？
He heard that you weren't in very good shape. Well, he went to see the show a couple days ago. You were having health problems.
I've done my backing, but how do you mean health problem?
調子悪いって言うと誰？具体的にどういう？
だから体調がちょっと悪かったみたいだけど、具体的にどういうことだったのかな。
なんかそういう個人的なことを聞いていいのかな。
アンコールが少なかったからでしょ。
そう。
No, I guess because you only went on encore. That's why he was wondering.
From that, it was from my back. It's like I can stand straight, but I find it very difficult to move in another angle. And so from working on stage, also this humidity, it's such little oxygen, you're fighting for breath all the time, I find, on stage, because it's really dry. But it was mainly for the point of the back, really, that by the time I came off, I was like barely walking, you know what I mean? And once I bend, I'm stuck in that position and people have to straighten me out.
Is that right?
Yeah, it gets like that sometimes.
Wow. いや、もう非常になんてもうステージに立つことさえも苦しいっていうか、ぎっくり腰なんだよね。そうなっちゃえばもうまっすぐにこう立てないっていうか、そういう危険を感じてね、ちょっと早引きしたっていうか、予定より早く終わってしまった。
今どうですか？
How about now?
I went to the hospital, had X-rays and all that, so I've been getting poultices and muscle relaxants and all this sort of thing. So I mean, it still hurts, but I mean, it's a bit better.
病院に治療を受けてたら大丈夫？
前作前のソロアルバムがね、そのアルバム作りの主導権があんまりなかったという、そういう点ですごく不満だったという、そういうインタビューの記事読んだことがあるんですけど、曲の出来そのものについても結構不満点が、大きいんでしょうか？
最初のアルバム。
そうそう、この前のやつ。
You heard that on your first album you didn't really have that much artistic control over it, or you had said in an interview that you were rather dissatisfied with not having enough artistic control.
Yeah, it's a bit of a difficult situation. That was the first album I'd made for a couple of years, and I had a lot of problems with my own confidence, you know, especially in terms of songwriting. I mean, I wrote most of the lyrics on it, as I always usually do, but it was more sort of like tempered towards what the producers were wanting in the lyric style than my own style. Because if you're working with people who are constantly, you know, giving the impression that that's the way things have to be and that's the way they can only work, then you tend to believe it for a while, you know. I think it's working with with producers who are used to having a lot of artistic control and tend to pull it away from you a bit. And the fact that it was the first album I'd made for a long time, I didn't have the confidence in myself to be able to turn around and say, stop, this is not the way it runs.
How are you satisfied with the final product, though, looking back in retrospect?
I think you have love affairs with albums, you know, you go through periods when you're infatuated with them and then you just stop talking, and I'm just getting back on talking terms now. Meaning it went through a period where I couldn't stand the album. You know, I can appreciate certain values in it now, and I'm getting more fond of it than I was, you know, say a year ago.
I guess it's something you kind of look back on as sort of a first step. You've been offered first step.
Well, yeah, that, and also if you have any sort of bad experiences, I think when you're actually writing songs or making a record, that tends to colour things very strongly for me.
What do you still think of it as that bad an experience? Then?
Well, I find that making an album with producers who refuse to record any songs unless they have publishing on it quite a bad experience.
Who did you have the most trouble with?
Oh, Swain and Jolly. That was the producer of the Alf album. They wouldn't record. They wouldn't listen to, you know, it's like, for example, I would come in with a song and I say, I've written a song, and they'd say, we have to change it. And I say, what do you mean we have to change it? You haven't heard it yet. And that was the situation.
That's pretty bad.
It was very bad, yeah.
Well, now that you've got that experience under your belt, I'm sure that it could not possibly happen again.
No, absolutely not.
You would send the producer sort of,
yeah,
show them the way to the door, and that would be it.
Absolutely.
なんていうのかな、今思えばかなりこう辛い経験だったっていうか、そのレコードを作ってた時っていうのはね、あの時はあんまりこうレコードを作るっていう経験なかったし、だからそのプロデューサーの言うなりになって、例えば自分の曲をこう書いて持ちかけてみるとね、
だからそういう主導権がね、なかったという話は結構有名で、結構聞いてるんだけど、曲の出来そのものについても不満があるわけ。
不満があったんだけども、今になってね、やっとこう好きになれたっていうかね、それでも最近のことでね、それまではどうも聞いてられなかったっていうか。
ということは、その自分があんまりその制作にタッチできなかったという事実がすごく大きかったわけです。
それがとても辛い。
今度の作品でね、自分でかなり曲をお作りになってるんですけど、やっぱりその単にそのシンガーとして優秀であって、いろんなパターンを歌いこなせる優秀なシンガーという、そういうイメージだけではとても満足できないものがあったということかな。
You have, of course, taken a much, you've got a much larger part in the total picture now in terms of making a record, and you're writing material yourself.
Well, I would like to point out that I always have done. I wrote a few singles for Yazoo and half the albums then, so I have always written material.
それでも最近のことじゃないけどね、ずっと前から曲書いてるし、何も最近になってやってそういうことできるようになったっていうことじゃないけどね。
でも前の作品より自分で作ってる分っていうのは多くないんですか？
っていうか、意識的にそういう打ち出しを自分で曲を作ってるっていう打ち出しが強くなされ、ヤズの頃から。
It's just a matter of what you're being able to have control of it now. So now whatever you write, you can put in direct into the album.
I think that well, it would be filtered slightly, but I mean, like in the Yazoo situation, it really was a 50-50 situation where someone would bring in a song, we record it, and I'd bring a song and we'd record it. It was quite amazing with the Yazoo in the sense that every song we brought in, we recorded, nothing was discarded. So there wasn't a filter process going on there. Whereas with the Swain and Jolly album, which was the third album I ever made, it was a case of any song that we went on there, we had to write as a 3. There had to be 2/3 of publishing going their way, otherwise it wasn't recorded. So it was only that album that restrictions ever happened. It was never, you know, I've made 4 albums and it ever happened on one.
Is that right?
どこまで来たの？
だからそのいやずっと大体同じペースでね、作曲してるんだけども、でヤズの時は50-50でそのもう一人の人と
ビンス・クラークと
提供してたわけ、曲を。でそのなんていうのかな、曲がボツになったっていう経験はその最初のデビュー作だけ、この間の。それはなぜならばその2人のプロデューサーはね、その印税をこう狙って、そのどうしても自分の曲をこう入れたかったっていうか、君が曲書くんだったら僕らも一緒に書いてやるから。
なるほどね。今作においては特にそのボーカリストっていう面とね、それからソングライターっていう面と、どちらを強調したかったというのがありますか？
So there's no real. Do you think there was a conscious effort on your part to present yourself as a songwriter as much as a singer?
Definitely. I think more than anything, I was maybe I was a bit bored with not so much bored with singing, but I felt all my life I've done things that came easily to me in the sense that I've always opted for the easy way out. You know, I've never really tried anything. I've never persevered at anything. If anything came too difficult to me, then I'd drop it, and I always felt a bit of a cheat for that. You know. And I've always felt the same way with singing. Singing was something that came without a lot of practice, and I felt a bit of a cheat for it. And so, whereas songwriting is something that, you know, it takes a lot of time and a lot of struggle. You know, I'm not a prolific songwriter, although sometimes I write things that I'm very, very proud of. It's not something that I can do, you know, 3 times a day. And so, it was a part of that. And also, I find that at the moment with female singers, everything is so histrionic, everything is so overdone, you know what I mean? If you've got a singer who can sing a high note, she will sing that high note for the whole of the song, you know what I mean? And it's sort of like, the song is nothing, there's no basis there, it's just like a pleasant track that people can dance to, and this over the top caterwailing, over the top, you know what I mean, just because it's impressive. And I just got to the point where I think, well, because I can sing that high note means fuck all, you know what I mean. There's nothing I can do with it other than just put it there. So, you know, I want to have melody. I don't want to just like fill everything in with a typical soul riff. I want to have melody, I want to have lyric there, and I want to sing songs that many voices can sing, but that you couldn't stick over any chord structure. You know what I'm saying? So it was a very conscientious effort to make it, for me, I think, a song album as opposed to a singer's album.
Looking back on the finished product now, how do you think it stacks up against the caterwauling of the Scalpel group?
Well, I mean, I'm really pleased with this album. I mean, for me, it's the first album that I've done on my own, in a sense, you know what I mean? And so, I mean, I'm still a complete utter novice, and I've got a long, long way to go, and there's always things that you do that you look back and say, I wish I'd done this, or I wish I'd done that. But I think as an album, you know, I think it's got very strong songs, and there's things that I would change, as I'll always change with every album. But, and the next album I make, I'll probably feel like doing the caterwauling. It's just this particular time I was just very tired with everything being soul influenced, and, you know, having those same riffs all the time, just stuck over a nonsensical backing track. You know, in the sense that there was no song structure, it was just like a groove that was trendy and a melody line without any substance to the lyric, you know what I mean? As with what popular music seems to be at the moment.
Steve の質問は何だろう？
要するにその答えに関連してね、要するに彼女がこうもっと渋いものを作りたかったっていうね、最近の傾向としては女性ボーカルっていうのはね、もうとにかく派手に派手にっていう、もう派手に歌えるんだったら、とにかくめちゃくちゃ派手にこうやろうっていう、そういう傾向があるのに対して、自分がもっと渋いものを作りたかったんだけど、だからね、じゃあ僕は結果的にね、あなたが意図的に渋いものとその派手なものと比較してね、どうなの？そういう質問。
それで答えは？
答えはまあ一応納得がいい、納得のいくものっていうか、満足できるものになったと思う。まあでも次回からは私もやっぱり派手にやるんじゃないかと。
何ソングライターとしてすごく強調したかったという理由は何？
だからそういう理由なのは、要するにその、音そのものを変えたかった。でそれをやっぱりこう作曲のレベルから変えたかった。そういうところがあった。
ほら前ポール・ヤングにねインタビューした時にさ、人の曲ばっかりやってるんで、あなた自分で作ってそのソングライターとしての面を認められたくないのかみたいなことを言ったら、とにかくいい曲を作れなければ意味がないんで、自分の良さというのはむしろその自分が作った曲であれ、人が作った曲であれ、どちらがいいかを客観的に判断する能力があるということが自分の良さなんだみたいなことを言ってたんだけど、そういう発言についてはどういうふうに思うかというのを聞けますか？
You recall talking to Paul Young once, and Paul Young was saying the important thing is you know the song be right, the song be good, you make something out of it, and it doesn't matter whether you write it or whether another person writes it. I guess the most important thing is that you're able to differentiate between, you know, what is a good song, what's a bad song for you. What do you think of that type of philosophy?
I think it's true. Sometimes you make a mistake, you know. I think at the end of the day, you'll always feel closer to a song that you write yourself, because you sit more comfortably with a lyric that you write than maybe someone else writes. And I think lyrics are very important for a singer, not just because of the meaning of them, but the way that the phonetics sound with your voice, you know. But I think that will always stand. I mean, I've made mistakes, but that will always stand.
So you think that the lyrics play a big part in it then?
For me, they do. Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's certain sounds that I like to make that you know, that you might, you know, that a lyric writer that you work with might not understand. You know, it's a very personal thing, and it's a bit difficult to explain why you would use this word, but you don't particularly like to sing that word.
この作において特にそういう個人的なね、実生活を反映したような面がすごくこう詩に出てるような気がしたんだけど、昔はそういうふうには書けなかった方ですか？
自分の生活を反映したような。This time around, do you think you wrote lyrics that are easy to sing, or were they actually lyrics based on your own experiences and your own life?
Well, it's not a case of easy to sing. It depends. If I write a lyric that tends to be confusing, then that will tend to be very personal, and I'll make it more confusing so that people won't relate it too much to what I'm talking about. Because I like to keep things quite personal that way. If it's a blatant song, like a blatant love song, it has very little to do with my life and is more to do with phonetics.
I see. But how about this time around, say, compared to songs you've written in the past?
I'd say at the moment it's about 50-50. I mean, obviously when you're 16 and you write songs, they tend to be much more to do with your teenage angst than anything else. So I think it may be less than when you're much younger, but I'd say 50-50 really.
訳してください。スティーブの質問の後から。
今はなんていうのかな、もう50-50っていうか、その半分がその自分のこう個人的な体験に基づいた話と、その残りの半分っていうのはもうあくまでもこう作り話的な歌詞だっていう。でも若い時っていうのはね、例えば16歳の時に曲書くとするとそういう時はもうほとんど 100% 個人的な体験に基づいた歌詞を書くことになるけどね、若い人っていうのは。
だって昔はそういうふうな個人的な体験に基づいた歌詞っていうのはどちらかというと少なめじゃなかったの
？But it just gets the feeling that in the past you wrote lyrics that had less to do with your own life or they were less personal.
Maybe on the on the Alpha album I'd say so, but you know it depends. Going right back to Yazoo, some of the songs were very personal. You know, it depends if you look at my career spanning from Yazoo or my songwriting from Yazoo or from the last album.
勉強不足が露呈してしまいましたね。
気をつけて。
すいません。そうですね。じゃあちょっと昔の話を伺っていいですか。
I'd like to ask you some questions about the old days.
Okay.
前なんかパンクバンドを作ってたにいたらしいけども、本当ですか？
Had you had a punk band?
When I was 16.
どんなバンドですか？
What type of a band was it?
A thrash.
Thrash.
It's like X-ray specs sort of thing.
Loud and
loud and raucous.
すごくリズム&ブルースがね、彼女好きで、でほらこういう本格派の歌を歌ってる人だから、なんかパンク時代は逆にすごく肩身の狭い、周りとそういう趣味を共有できない孤立したところにいたんじゃないかと思ってたけど、そうじゃないんですか？
So I always thought of you as a person who's had a great affinity for like rhythm and blues, black music. So the fact that you did punk, does that mean you felt very isolated at the time, or were you swept up in the craze?
No, I mean it was something. I come from like a small industrial town, you know, where there's absolutely nothing to do, and everything for teenagers were based around the disco and the budget that you had for your clothes, you know, which I found totally distasteful, and it was something that I felt very strongly to. Music at that time for me was nothing more than a means of being an exhibitionist and a release of energy. You know, it wasn't for its musical depth or anything like that. I got very disillusioned with the punk factor when the new wave move came in, and all of my friends suddenly changed fashion, and I felt really let down and betrayed by it, because to me punk was never a fashion, you know. And so instead of following on with my friends, I sort of went off on my own and ended up in Southend, where they had groups like Dr. Feelgood and Lou Lewis, stuff like that, you know, which was, for me, had the same heart. You know, it was a thrash, it was a good time, everyone was out there, you know, having a few beers, sweating, not worrying about what they had on, not worrying about what they looked like when they came out of the show. You know, it was just a really good vibe, and at that time it was still very much an energy thing for me. And it was a little bit later when I started wanting something more from music than that I looked back before the time with the Feelgoods and stuff like that to their influences of people like Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf. I started getting involved with their black music.
I see. もともとそのパンクをやりだしたのはね、要するにエネルギー発散っていうか、まあそういったものをこうなんていうのかな、こう追ってねやってみたんだけども、それでそういうパンクファッションがね、流行るようになったら今度。昔のリズム&ブルーズを今度、なんていうのかな、興味を持つようになって、でそこからその黒人音楽に自分の経歴を簡単に紹介する。だパンクはっていうのはあくまでももう若い時にやって、エネルギー発散っていうそういう目的で。
そうなんだ。ということは音楽に結構のめり込んでたそのきっかけとしてパンクムーブメントっていうのがあったってことなの？
さっき言い忘れたけども、小さなね工業都市で育ったわけ、でそこで何にもやることないっていうか非常に退屈な話で、 で唯一の趣味が音楽、あるいはこのなんていう洋服に金をかけること、それだけ。それで音楽に走ったんですね、最初。
なるほどね。そこがパンクに入って、それをこうパンクのルーツをたどっていくことによってブルースとかそういう方に流れていった。
パンクはそのパブロック。
パブロック。
これはパンクの後、ドクターフィールグッド。
なるほど。そうか。じゃあ昔からそのブルースの、趣味があったとかって一部で言われてるようだけど、そうでもないんだ。
So it wasn't a matter of you like, you know, you didn't exactly take that great interest in black music or rhythm and blues from the very outset.
No.
Yeah, it just came later. It was after that.
Yeah.
Your post-Dr. Phil.
Yeah.
なるほどね。最近のそのイギリスのミュージックシーンとか見ますと、なんかリズム&ブルースの影響がないとヒットしないっていうぐらい、かなりそういうね、影響を大幅に盛り込んだグループが、上位に活躍しているという気がするんですけれども、そうした全般的な傾向についてどういうふうにお考えですか？
It almost seemed that all the songs that at the top of the charts in the UK these days are sort of rhythm and blues inflected, or somewhere along the line they've taken elements from Motown or 70s disco or whatever. What do you think of this sort of a situation?
Well, it bored me, and that's why I think I went into the direction I did. And as much as I do love those forms of music, and I will, no doubt do them in the very near future, it's just something at the time that I was completely tired of.
Tired of being, you were tired of it because everybody else was doing it?
Yeah, it's just that, I find it's been overused, and not necessarily to the best aspects of it have been overused. It's like I was saying, everything is at the top. There's very little shade to it, I think a prime example of another song, which is not R&B at all, but I mean, like for example, Simon and Garfunkel, like Bridge Over Troubled Water, it's like, it's right at the end of the song when he goes up like that, and it has such an impact on the song that it really takes you somewhere. Whereas like the records are now, they're starting there and they're ending there, they go nowhere, and that's what seems to be happening at the moment.
確かに君が言った通りっていうか、もう全くなんていうのかな、もうワンパターンで、それで自分が意図的にね違う方向に行った。で、なんだっけな、今感動がないっていうかね、例えば感激がないっていうか、ね、感動しない。そういう曲ばっかりでね、例えばいい例を挙げると、昔のサイモン&ガーファンクルのブリッジオーバートラブルウォーターあったんだけど、あれがもう最後の方も突然盛り上がってくるんだけども、そのような、ね、感動が今ないんで、だからわざとちょっとこう一歩離れて違った方向に行ってしまった。
ということはじゃあそういう感動がないというふうに彼女が思ってるねR&B の解釈の仕方をしているバンドというのはあなたとはちょっと解釈が違うっていうところがあるのかな？
Do you think that maybe your outlook on music is different from all the people who are sort of using the black roots now? I mean, you said that most of these songs are like a straight line, never go anywhere. Maybe your outlook on music is different from theirs.
I just like a lot of variety, I mean, I like to change a lot and regularly, It's not to say that I will ever go back to point one again, but I just, I think for me singing should reflect your mood always, not necessarily the charts, and, if I feel like singing, a heavy song, that's because I'm in that mood. If I feel like singing a ballad, it's because I'm in that mood, and that's why I might go from pop to jazz to R&B, regularly changing like that, and I think that's all it is. I don't want to be hampered or limited by whatever box someone's putting me in at that particular week.
いいです。前作が130万枚もイギリスで売れてしまったという膨大なセールスを記録したんですけど、そういうそのセールス上のやっぱり今作も結構売れなきゃいけないというプレッシャーというのは当然あったと思うんですが、それを一つと、それから現在のセールス状況というのはどうなんだろうという、それを2つ聞いてください。
The last album did quite well.
Which is the album, right?
Yeah, you said you heard it sold like 1.3 million copies.
In England?
Yeah.
They did that in England, yeah. It did about 3 million, I think, worldwide.
And that must mean the pressure is pretty intense to equal that. this time around, or you don't really think about that?
To be honest, I don't feel that. I know that I could have. I know that I could have excelled my numbers by making a soul album, but you know, I don't think that I have to do all of my put all of my sales, concentrate them into one particular year. You know, I'm happy to do that over 2 albums, if that's what I feel like doing. Then you know.
How's the album doing now?
It's gone over 1 million in yeah. It's gone worldwide, that is though. But the other things you have to take into account for marketing, for example, is that in England it did about 500,000 and then was TV advertised, which will always knock up sales. This album, to point, hasn't been TV advertised yet.
そんなにプレッシャーがないっていうかね、それ以上こう売れる LP は一応ね作ることはできたと思うよ。例えばこう意識的にねソウルアルバムを作ってみたらもう前作以上のセールスは多分獲得できたと思うけども、だけどもそういう安易なことはねやりたくなかったら、それでも今の LP は結構売れ行きが好調で、世界ではもう100万枚を超えてるけどね、まだテレビのね宣伝なしで。
なるほどね。ちょっとさっき聞き忘れたんですが、今までそのコンピューターを使ってね、まあ大体キーボードとコンピューターでずっと作ってきたと思うんですが、それ今回生バンドっていうかセッションミュージシャンを使って作ってるわけだけど、そういう点で、なんかすごく良くなった点、前と変わった点聞いてください。
The approach to making the music in the studio this time around seems to have been different from before, in that you used more of a band type format. What are the differences? What are the improvements or the flaws?
Well, the differences are being that this producer likes to use other musicians, whereas the other ones wanted to do it themselves.
No.
So that again was another consideration.
How about for you though?
Well, for me, I mean, I've always liked the idea of getting someone to do what they do best. You know what I mean? Not just to keep it in house all the time, which again was another problem I found with Yazoo, because we were very much part of the independent setup. That when you're independent, you felt you had to do everything yourself, and in some tracks it worked fabulously. Other ones we just didn't have the technology or the knowledge to be able to pull it off, and so that's where the flaws were, I think, in those albums. And so I just found it very interesting to work with session musicians. It's something I've never done before.
And actually having done it, how did it turn out? Was it better than you thought it would be? Would you ever go back to the old setup, or are you going to stick with this one?
I think again it depends on what music you do, and that is always the case. You know, I don't think you have to have one particular routine. I think you should always change depending on the record that you're making.
ちょっと次のは変な質問なんですけど、ポップミュージックの中にそのあなたのようにねオーソドックスに人を感動させるというか、非常に成功法でもって歌のパワーでね感動させるというそういうこう成功法の他になんか方法論でこう一発当てるとかキャラクターの面白さで、弾けるように売れるとかね、そういった例えばビースティボーイズみたいな、バンドもいるけれども、あなたにとってはそうした、方法論というかキャラクターを持ったバンドってどういうふうに映るんでしょう？
This is kind of an off-the-wall question, but you seem to be take a very orthodox approach to music. It was like you just mentioned "Bridge Over Troubled Waters." It's a good example of what's truly exciting or thrilling about pop music, and it's a very traditional sort of orthodox way of looking at pop. However, of course, a lot of pop music is based on novelty, like a Beastie Boys type of thing. How do you look at the novelty side of pop? Do you completely divorce yourself from it? Is that
not at all? I enjoy it very much, but you know, if you have nothing else to sell, if you have no, you know, if you don't write great pop songs or you don't have a voice that particularly stands, then you have to rely on the novelty. And I enjoy novelty records as much as anyone. But again, I think that that's as safe as orthodox as anything else. There's, you know, there is a very set routine. There's quite an obvious way that you can have a pop record, a hit record, you know, and everyone knows that. And I think that doing those sort of like off-the-wall dance records are no more daring than anything else. In fact, they're very obvious because you know exactly what the 16-year-old wants, and you know exactly that it's a 16-year-old that will buy your records. And so to make that record, I think it's a safer hit than any other.
いやむしろ好きだっていうか、だけどもそういったものは別にこう奇抜だと思ってないけど、むしろ無難なんじゃないかな。
無難。
そういうのはだってやっぱり若い連中にはね、そういう奇抜なものは受けるに決まってんじゃない。だからもう無難っていうか面白くないっていうか、
当たり前すぎる。
当たり前すぎる。常識的だ。
そうするとあなたはよくほらポップの方法論で出てくるね。 なんていうのかな、このショックを与えてさ、すごくこうグラマラスな衣装を着てさというふうなまあ、ポップのあり方っていうのは卒業しちゃったという感じかな。
You basically consider yourself beyond like any, we'll say an approach to pop as hackneyed as say outlandish get-ups or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, you know, I'm not a model type, and there's absolutely no point in me portraying myself in that way. I think you have to do that. I really do believe that you have to do that if the voice that you have or anything else, you know, tends to bend towards the mediocre.
Yeah. なんていうかな、作曲力とね、歌唱力のない人たちはそういう方法にね、こう頼るざるをないと私は関係ない。
なるほど。ところでじゃあ最後の質問なんですけど、ポップといえばね、やっぱいろんな、例えばその新聞がプライバシーを探るとかね、そういったこう浮ついた面っていうのは非常に多いと思うんですが、そうしたその浮ついた世界の中から、自分のそのプライベートな部分を守っていくのっていうのは結構大変ですか、実感として。
One last question. Often the media is more concerned with the superfluous matters such as the privacy of the musician and whatnot. Do you find it's tough to cope with that, to maintain your privacy while also staying in the public eye?
Well, firstly, I think that if you live by the media, you can die by the media, and that's down to you. You know, if you choose to use the papers to make yourself a success, then you're going to have to expect what you get from them. I've always totally avoided national newspaper whenever I can. I don't go out of my way to do interviews with them or anything like that, because I know that if I do benefit from them, then I'm also going to lose by them. Also, national papers, things like that, who are usually more tuned towards the gossip factor, want to have a line on you. You know, you either have, you know, they will either portray you as they need to stick you in a box, which are usually sex kitten, drug addict, which they can't put me in these. They are faced with an unconventionally looking mother, and all they can end up putting me in is like this Mother Earth box, which is completely unfactual. You know what I mean? It's just it's complete utter nonsense. So it doesn't. You know, it started off, you know, that I would get very offended by things that were written, and now it just makes me laugh. I mean, in the last couple of months, I've read that I left my husband for a singer lover. I was in a mental home. I then went back to my husband because I was a strict Catholic and didn't believe in divorce. And then I dropped my singer lover for another young thing that I was taking. It's just, you know, I just find it quite interesting. You have to read newspapers to find out who you're sleeping with that week.
It's interesting. I'd always thought that Britain was a little more progressive, but actually it's very reactionary.
I think that
very reactionary.
The English newspapers, I think, they speak for themselves. They're a class within their own.
Yeah.
They're, you know, and in some ways it's a shame, because I know for me and my other counterparts in England, we will always avoid press when we can, purely because of our experiences, and because we don't speak languages, we don't know the quality of press you get anywhere else. Sometimes, you know, it's completely gutter press. You get in England, you can get reviews of your records that never once mention the record, just rather your girth size, and you're sitting there saying, my records are being reviewed by someone who writes like someone does on a toilet wall. You know what I mean? That is the quality of their literature, and how you can take that seriously, I just don't know.
Why are British people so, you know, that have a very good side, but why on the other hand are they so nasty? It's a real nasty.
It's a terrible nastiness. In England, there's no respect for success in England. I mean, the English are. I think in some ways you can call the English socialists until they win the polls. You know what I mean? That if they have nothing, they want everyone to have nothing. If they have something, they want to keep it to themselves. I think that's very much in English. They have no respect for success unless it is their own, really. And I think that in England we've lost a lot of things. We don't have a strong basis. We don't have a strong family set up in England. There's no moral holding. I mean, we don't have any particular church. We have nothing, no moral point of view particularly, and so there tends to be a lot of, you know, a lot of confusion and you know, a lot of boredom. There's very little facilities. That we're a lazy nationality. And we tend to, you know, just like that sort of television and that sort of newspaper. I just think it's because we sort of like lost ourselves, really, I think.
いいです。Thanks a lot.
I'll do it then.
で、あと写真を。
Oh, that's right. I want to get a couple of photos if you could.
Yeah, sure.